Hi, this is Alan Perkins from Horns Digest through the Scout Network. Don't forget to check out Horns Digest, where Chip Brown has 25 years of experience covering UT athletics. Make sure you follow me on Twitter as well, at Alan Perkins HD. That's ALLENPERKINS. Also, check out my YouTube channel. If you just type in Alan Perkins HD in the YouTube search bar, my name should be the first to come up for my channel, and you can check out where I do kind of film study, and the podcasts are on there as well. Apologize for my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather. So today's topic is the college football playoff, the final rankings that came out this past Sunday. Today is December 7th, Wednesday, and I just wanted to get into the argument for both sides for Penn State, and also talk about Washington, Clemson, and Ohio State as well, as far as who was deserving or who was the best team or what have you. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this topic, because if y'all just want to post on the YouTube page or something along those lines, because that's what makes college football great, is the conversation and the controversy and the passion of the sport. And I will say that I feel strong about my convictions. I spent a lot of time researching the team schedules and resumes and all that. But there is fact coupled with opinion in this argument, so there's not any 100% correct answer in my mind, regardless of what stance anyone would take. So it can be spun in many different ways, and I'm open for discussion and debate. So I want to go over the guidelines for the college football playoff real quick from the college football playoff website. It says that, and I quote, "The selection committee ranks the teams based on conference championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head results, comparison of results against common opponents, and other factors." So I think the key there is other factors, because they basically open themselves up to saying anything. And then it also says, and I quote, "Every FBS team has equal access to college football playoff based on its performance. No team automatically qualifies." So other factors and the terms "no team automatically qualifies" I think are the biggest things. And again, if you just go to the college football playoff website, you can look up all of their parameters and guidelines and what they hold themselves to. But they value, the college football committee values the conference championship, but it's not an end-all. It's not a, oh, you won the championship, your team won the championship, or this team won the championship, now they're automatically in. They don't think that way. So, in my opinion, that's good, and I'm going to talk about that, why I think that's good at the end. So, to me, people complaining that Penn State should have been in the playoff against Ohio State, if a fan is arguing Penn State versus Ohio State, whose resume is better, or who's more deserving, or who's the best team, to me is kind of silly. I could understand more, really, an argument against Clemson or Washington personally, more so than Ohio State. So I'm going to tell you why. So first off, it needs to be clear that everyone remembers that Penn State lost 49-10 against Michigan. Michigan beat Penn State in the middle of the year by 39 points. I'm going to say that again. Penn State lost by 39 points to Michigan. Have you ever seen a team make a BCS championship game or a playoff game having lost by 39 points? The only game that I can remember is Oklahoma losing to Kansas State in the mid-2000s in the Big 12 championship and then still making it in. But one of the reasons why they still made it in is because they had a dominant run the entire season and they were undefeated going into that game, and no other teams really matched in resume from what I remember. So it was a little bit of a different situation. And even that was not 39 points that Kansas State beat them by. So that's the number one biggest thing to me. Also, if Ohio State doesn't beat Michigan, then Penn State doesn't even win the division. Michigan would have won the division, and Michigan would have been in the Big Ten championship. And I know it's a moot point now, but I'm just saying Penn State needed help just to get into the Big Ten championship. So they wouldn't have even won their division either if Michigan would have beaten Ohio State, or if some people out there are saying that Michigan technically did beat Ohio State because they weren't fond of that spot in overtime at the 15-yard line that Ohio State got. So that's something else to be considered. When Penn State beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, they won by 7 points, which was the exact same amount of points that Ohio State beat Wisconsin by in Madison. Ohio State beat Wisconsin by 7 also. And everyone, or I'm assuming everyone knows that's listening, that Penn State beat Ohio State in Happy Valley in a comeback victory. So obviously head-to-head, there's no argument there. But the problem is you're arguing Penn State has 2 losses and Ohio State has 1. If both teams had 1 loss, there wouldn't be a debate, in my mind. But Penn State lost twice and Ohio State lost once. So you can't just throw those things out. The other thing is, too, you have to look at the game and say, okay, how did each game go? Why did a team win or lose? Like, for example, if a team has an injury or something like that, that's something that I think the committee would consider and that reasonable people would consider, because obviously a team isn't going to be nearly as good if they have a great quarterback and that quarterback gets injured or something like that, and they win every single game significantly by huge margins and then lose the one game that the quarterback was injured in. I think in the future the committee would consider something like that. So Penn State beat Ohio State. It was in Happy Valley, and Penn State was trailing late in the game, and they blocked 2 kicks, one that they returned. They blocked a field goal and returned it for a touchdown, and they blocked a punt earlier in the game, and that resulted in a field goal. So that was 10 points that Penn State got. Those were their last 10 points of the game to win by 3. And so that's not even beating a team, really, in my mind, not straight up, but sort of fluky sort of things with special teams blocking 2 kicks. It's not as if Penn State went up and down the field on Ohio State all day long or something. So that's even more so, that's part of the game, and kudos to Penn State for making those plays, and they won the game within the rules of the game, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, sort of a, like I said, kind of a fluky kind of victory. And again, Penn State was at home in that game, so that's something to take into consideration. And like I said, Penn State can't forget the loss to Pitt, and they can't forget the 39-point loss to Michigan. Those don't just go away. So Ohio State lost 1 game the whole year in the situation I described by 3 points after getting 2 kicks blocked, yet Penn State lost to Pitt by 3, also on the road. But they also lost to Michigan on the road by 39 points. So Ohio State doesn't have a loss like that. So those are 2 very different resumes to me. I don't know where the confusion is on that. Penn State also can't compete with Ohio State's 18-point win on the road against Oklahoma. Ohio State went into Oklahoma and into Norman and dominated that game. Just absolutely dominated Oklahoma. And Oklahoma was the team that ended up winning the Big 12. So that's obviously a very strong victory, and that's an out-of-conference game that Ohio State scheduled. And Penn State's biggest out-of-conference game that they scheduled was against Pitt, and they lost that game. So when Penn State is trumpeting the Big Ten as the best conference in the FBS, which a lot of people say that it is this year, that's great, but that's rather fortunate for Penn State and for Ohio State that the Big Ten was great this year, because the Big Ten has been down by national standards until recently, till the last couple years, based on the perception of the strength of the league. And so Penn State has no control. And I said an 18-point lead. I apologize. Ohio State beat Oklahoma 45-24. So, quick mental math, that would be 21 points, actually, that Ohio State beat Oklahoma by 45-24 in Norman, that Ohio State won by. But anyways, I lost my train of thought. I'll just jump forward here. The other thing is, some people were saying, and lots of people say when it comes to the Heisman race or playoff races or BCS races, that, well, if a team loses early in the year, then that doesn't count as much against a team because it's how they're playing at the end of the year, and Penn State did have that situation. But if Penn State gets to have a mulligan, or say those games don't count, or they don't count as much, well, then doesn't Ohio State get to say the same thing on a road loss in the middle of the year, and then that leaves Penn State with still another loss, whichever one you want to pick to say that doesn't count, and then Ohio State has no losses if you're talking about mulligans that you can just throw away. So that still leaves Penn State in a disadvantage when arguing against the 2 resumes. Like I said earlier, does the head-to-head matter? Of course it matters. It's quite obvious, and it should be very important. But the problem is that you're not comparing two equal resumes in this situation. You're comparing a Penn State team that lost 2 games, won by 39 points, and Ohio State team that lost 1 game by 3 points on the road. And Penn State's, both of their losses were on the road too. But still, those are not the same thing. So then head-to-head matters less, because that's like saying, well, my team won, not my team, but that's like saying, well, if I'm supporting Penn State or hypothetical team A, let's just say hypothetical team A. Hypothetical team A won the head-to-head versus hypothetical team B, but hypothetical team A had 6 losses. But they won the head-to-head, so that's all that matters. No, that's insane. You have to look at the whole body of work, not just what happened in one game head-to-head. So I know it's not that extreme, but it's still 2 losses versus 1. And obviously Penn State and Ohio State are in the same division, so they played a very similar schedule in conference. So to me, looking at Clemson and Washington is more where Penn State should be concerned or focusing their frustration, because Clemson had a lot of close wins this year, and they also lost to Pitt, and they lost to Pitt at home by 3 points also, so that's a common opponent, and that's where Penn State and Clemson both have a common opponent where they had the same loss. And like I said, Clemson this year, they played a lot of close games, and they just weren't very impressive. They beat Auburn by 6. They beat Troy by 6. They destroyed South Carolina State. They beat Georgia Tech by 19. They beat Louisville by 6 when Louisville was undefeated in Clemson. They blew out Boston College, beat NC State by 7. Florida State, they won by 3 in Tallahassee. That's an impressive win. They blew out Syracuse, lost to Pitt by 1 on a last-second field goal. They beat Wake Forest by 22. And they blew out South Carolina, and then they beat Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game by 7. So not a lot of impressive wins for Clemson. And their out-of-conference schedule, to me, scheduling Auburn is an impressive opponent. And then obviously South Carolina State and Troy are weak, but that's the same setup as Ohio State and Penn State, where all 3 of those teams had one tough out-of-conference opponent. OSU had Oklahoma. Penn State had Pitt, and Clemson had Auburn. So to me, Auburn's tougher than Pitt, or at least equal, and especially by how those programs have done recently. Whenever that game was scheduled, Auburn obviously won a national championship and went to another one. So clearly, lately, a stronger program than Pitt. So the out-of-conference schedules is pretty identical between Clemson and Penn State. And the other thing is too is that Penn State blew a lot of people out, a lot of teams out late in the year, but early in the year they had a lot of close games before they got rolling along. They beat Kent State by 20. They only beat Temple by 7. Now Temple won their conference, so that looks better now, but still it's Temple. Penn State barely beat Minnesota. And then after that, they started rolling off big wins pretty much the rest of the year. So, except for Wisconsin and Ohio State, but those were tough teams, obviously, so it doesn't matter. So, anyways, I'm going to do a part 2 of this podcast to carry on, because I'm not done saying all the things that I would like to say. So just check out the part 2 that I'll post under the same title, and I'll be posting that shortly. And I really appreciate y'all listening and supporting the podcast, and I hope y'all have a great holiday season. I hope y'all had a good Thanksgiving, and I will talk to y'all soon. Thanks. Bye.